Do you think universal truth exists or not? Do you think there is such a thing as universal truth?
I don't know how my worldview would be different if I said yes or no to that.
Well,
Like for example, there are people who are
like from
colorblind.
your perspective or my perspective?
Well, from my perspective, let me just illustrate it. So,
Okay.
like, for example, there are people who are colorblind. I think Andrew is,
Yeah.
which I'll make use of a lot in epistemic debates because it's a great tool. If I was wearing, I think he's red-green colorblind, if that's correct. So, if I was wearing a red
Mhm.
shirt and I said, is it an objective fact that I'm wearing a red shirt? You could say, well, no, because colors only exist in our perception of the world. They don't actually exist out in reality. But then it's also like, well, so is it a subjective fact that I'm wearing a red shirt? It's like
Well,
that example illustrates the, I would say,
here's what I want to introduce
confoundingness
here.
of like, well, what
You
do you mean
just
by universal
assume
truths and
that
whatnot?
God doesn't exist while saying that, well, that's just our perception where we implement colors in our head. But I believe God is an eternal observer, for example. So
Sure.
can I not say that therefore reality is objective because God is eternally observing these things?
You can do that once you've accepted God as real, which is just as much of a leap of faith as me accepting
Ye-
you being conscious is real, or that you are conscious.
Yes, but here's what I'm getting to is that you're making claims about what you're perceiving things, right? Things about color, how it relates to us. But
Mm-hmm.
again, that's from first principles. And that's why I'm asking about first principles, which you said is just language games and all this kind of stuff. That's why it's not a language game, because that's a perfect example of how your worldview, two people can take the same fact, look at the same fact, and come to completely different conclusions due to their
Right.
worldview.
Agreed.
That's precisely what is going on. And
Yes.
so, we can, when it comes to worldviews in themselves, you do have to justify these worldviews, unlike, justifying your taste in music. A worldview is not the same thing as music. It's
Sure.
not just personal opinion. Just like truth is not just personal opinion. Universal truth exists. It's
Yes.
always going to exist because the very definition of universal truth itself is that if I were to deny it, and this kind of gets to another point, if I were to deny universal truth, I will have to be using universal truth to deny universal truth, because then someone can just ask,
Right.
well, how, is it, then are you saying that it's universal truth, that universal truth is not real?
Yes.
Obviously
Right.
that's
Right.
ridiculous,
Yeah.
right?
If I say all truth are partial truths, well, then how do I know that the claim that all
Yeah,
truth
is
are
that
partial?
true
Right. Yes.
partial?
I get that. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go with the first point you made. You said, how do you resolve? Actually, the very first point you made is, well, I could just, like you said, I could just say fairies are real, and I might call you schizophrenic or whatever, and I would say
Yeah.
one of the ways we measure whose worldviews are more true, and I'm purposely putting quotes here, is the degree to which other people have the same experience. So, for example, if 100 people see the color red, okay, we can say it's true that I'm wearing a red shirt. If one person doesn't because they're colorblind and an idiot, just kidding,
So, yeah.
then it's like okay, well, does it, because that one person didn't see the color red, does that mean his shirt's not really red? It's like I don't.
Maybe.
Well,
I
but
mean,
that's my point.
like from your
Maybe
stand,
fair
like
enough,
from
fair
because
enough,
because
but
because hey, why maybe? Because you're basing your epistemology and your worldview from the standpoint of, I perceive things and I have knowledge of these things. I perceive that this color is this way, and so the color of the shirt is this way. But the way you said how it corresponds to what other people say, that sounds a lot like bandwagon fallacy to me. Are you basing your worldview on what other people are saying? I think that's an invalid move.
well,
You can't
I
do that.
well, if you're Eastern Orthodox, you base your worldview off of church elders, so you do base your worldview off what other people are saying. But I get your point of like it's bandwagon. You can't just say, oh well, other people believe it, therefore it's true. I'm not saying that that's as simple. I'm saying
Mhm.
one measure by which we can determine whose worldview is more true than someone else's is, well, if you're the only person out of 1,000 saying it, chances are you're probably wrong. Now, not always, and it probably in the most the what would you say, the biggest breakthroughs in humanity have been when the one person has been right and the other 1,000 have been wrong. So, but I'm just kind of speaking generally here. To the point about how do we resolve the difference? How do we know that one worldview is more right than the other or more cohesive? I would say it's a matter of, again, utility. It's like if you say, well, there's fairies everywhere. Well, how do I know that?
Mhm.
How do I know that there are not fairies everywhere and that they're causing? Or you gave an earlier example about, well, if I tap my feet in a certain,
Yeah, yeah.
it'll
In the
start to rain.
explanation of the justified true belief,
Right,
right?
right, yeah. So if you're a
Someone can believe that,
right,
and it can still rain.
so if you have a farmer who bases his worldview on, well, when I tap my feet in a certain way, it'll rain, versus a farmer who says, well, rain is a subject of the weather and whatever the more accurate, you know, explanation of when and how rain falls. The two of them one of them is going to run into issues because he's going to plant all of his crops, do his little tap dance. It doesn't
Based
rain.
on that assumption, yeah.
Right, and then the practical utility is, well, he fails.
But here's
in
the
that
question:
regard,
what
and
if it
that's how we
does
can
rain all
evaluate
the
it.
time? What if it does rain when he does it all the time? Does it make it true?
It's
But look,
what
it's
if
a
it does?
thought
Hold on, wait.
experiment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thought
Well, that's why
experiments are
I'm willing
very
to
much used
entertain
in
it. I know.
philosophy.
I'm willing
Okay.
to entertain it. What if it happened all the time?